It's been a couple of weeks or maybe even months at this point since I did the unboxing of this video and probably got you guys excited on the build. Now I had a lot of stuff to do, still have a lot of projects going on, but finally found some time to work on this one. So just to get started with it all, I took it out of the box, started sanding the body down with some 600 grit to get it nice and grippy for the paint to stick to it. Did it for a couple of smaller parts on the exterior as well, and then moved it into the spray booth. First of all, I just blow over it with some air through the airbrush to remove any loose dust that is on there, and then of course start on those hard to reach, easy to forget spots first before moving on to the rest of the body. The primer I'm using this time is from Splash. It is their gray primer. It works really well, lays down nice and smooth, and also dries nice and quick. With the first coat of primer now applied, the coverage is nearly there, but I just set it aside for 5 to 10 minutes to dry and then moved on to applying a second coat of primer and to get it all fully covered, and then let it cure for about 30 minutes before I move to applying the first color. So like I just said, the primer dries pretty nice and smooth, and in this case I decided not to sand it down as the finish was really nice already. You could decide to sand it down with a 2,000 or 3,000 grit to get it even smoother before you start laying down the colors, or maybe even get some dust out of the paintwork itself, but in this case I found it not necessary and could just move on to applying the first initial color. Now the body on this one is painted in various different colors. The first one I'm applying here is from number 5. They supplied me with the paints for this build, specifically the colors, and that is the white on the roof. I let that cure overnight just to be sure, as I haven't worked with this paint before, that it is properly cured, but probably after a couple of hours you would be good to go for masking it off. So with the masking completed on the roof, I could move on to the main body color, which is red. Again, this is also from number 5. The red that I'm applying here is covering super well, and pretty much after the first coat reached full coverage. Now I decided, just like with the whites, to go for 3 coats. The white covered really nicely on the first coat and probably was fully covered on the second coat, but just to be absolutely sure I applied a 3rd coat of white, and I did the same for the red before letting it sit for about 5 minutes after the final coat, and then carefully start peeling off the masking tape to reveal the white roof. The A-pillars also needed to be painted, and these are supposed to be painted in a matte black. I'm doing this before applying all of the decals, so using a matte or a gloss black in this case doesn't matter, as after the fact I will need to apply a clear coat over them to get the final finish. The entire body will be stickered up and then clear coated with a gloss, so I need to let that cure afterwards and later apply a flat finish to these A-pillars, but I just wanted to paint them already so they have a nice smooth transition with the rest of the paintwork. With those done, I could move on to masking off the entire back half of the body pretty much, and the hood too, as those needed to stay white, black, and red, so I could paint the nose or just the front bumper and the front fenders with an anthracite gray. The gray is also covering very nicely, and I applied 2 coats before achieving full coverage. Once those were completed, I let it sit for about 5 minutes just to get air dry, or dry enough for dust not to stick into it, and could then move on to carefully removing all of the masking tape. Some of the other parts that need to be painted at the same time in the same colors as the exterior were of course handled as well. In this case I'm just painting the front fenders in that same anthracite gray as the front bumper, and there were also a couple of other small pieces for the rear over fenders that needed to be painted red, so I painted those at the same time I did the red of course. The tedious, also a bit nerve-wracking, but mostly very satisfying job of unmasking has now been completed, and you can see the final paint color scheme revealed. I then let it sit for another 10 minutes, and in the meantime started mixing up the 2K clear from Streetblisters. I'm going to be applying a first coat of clear, trying to get it nice and smooth, but mainly focus on just sealing in the paintwork for the decals to go on top later. Now you could just start applying the decals on the paintwork without clear coating it, but I've found with the amount of decals that I need to apply on this one, putting it on top of a clear coat just helps the decals move and conform to the shape a bit better. And since I will also be using a lot of decal setting and softening solutions, those can potentially burn into the paintwork if you're using a lot of heat, or just let them set and soak in, and that can leave a bit of an ugly surface. And with a clear coat underneath, it just prevents that from happening and gives a nice solid base to work on top of. I will not be going for a full super smooth finish here, but just trying to get it really nice and smooth for the decals to lay on top, and then at a further stage after those decals have all been applied, I will go for another final coat of clear, trying to get that nice and smooth. The body is now nicely sealed and has a pretty smooth finish. I'm going to set this aside for a couple of days, letting it properly cure, and then move on to the enormous task of applying the decals all over the exterior. And that is all to come in the next video.